The DNA excluded both brothers from the very beginning. The prosecution convicted them anyway, life without parole. 25 years later, college students found the real killer. The midnight paradigm. Today, we examine the case of David and Robert Bintz and the evidence everyone chose to ignore. Here at the midnight paradigm, we trace the evidence the system refused to follow. But first, a detail that will become important much later: a femur bone in a Wisconsin grave. Green Bay, Wisconsin, August 1987. Sandra Lison worked Sundays at the Good Times Tavern. She was 44 years old, a mother of two, known for her warmth behind the bar. Her regulars described a woman who remembered every name and never let a glass sit empty. On August 3rd, Sandra closed the bar alone and locked the front door. Two customers that evening noticed a man speaking with Sandra near closing. He was never identified. The next morning, Sandra's body was found 30 miles north, in the Machicanny forest. She had been beaten and strangled. What was done filled pages of the report. Investigators collected semen and blood from Sandra's clothing. In 1987, DNA profiling barely existed. The samples were sealed and filed. They would wait decades for the science to catch up. Detectives focused on the unidentified man last seen at the bar. They followed leads that went nowhere. David and Robert Bintz were questioned early. They had purchased beer from Sandra that night. They had complained about being overcharged. That was the extent of their connection to Sandra Lison. No physical evidence linked them to the crime. The investigation moved on, then it stopped entirely. For 10 years, Sandra Lison's murder sat in a filing cabinet, a cold case gathering dust. 1998, Oshkosh Correctional Institution. David Bintz was serving time for an unrelated offense. His cellmate reported to guards that David screamed in his sleep, words about killing a woman. This is the foundation of 2 life sentences, a cellmate's interpretation of nightmares. Guards instructed the cellmate to keep engaging David in conversations about these alleged nightmares. According to the Innocence Project, jailhouse informant testimony contributes to 15% of all wrongful convictions. In murder cases, that number is 50%. Half involve a jailhouse informant. The cellmate claimed David later confessed while awake, admitting he and Robert killed Sandra Lison together. Confronted by police, David confirmed the cellmate's account and simultaneously denied any involvement. That contradiction should have raised every red flag. Instead, it became the prosecution's foundation. This is where the investigation failed, the gravitational pull of a convenient answer. In the year 2000, both brothers were arrested for Sandra Lison's murder. The prosecution rested on the word of a single jailhouse informant with incentive to lie. No fingerprints connected the brothers to the scene, no physical evidence, no weapon, no witnesses. Then there was the DNA. Police collected samples from both brothers for comparison. Both David and Robert were excluded. The semen did not come from either brother. In any rational investigation, this would have ended the case against them. The science had spoken clearly. The prosecution changed its theory. They argued the semen came from a consensual encounter. Sandra's friends and family told police she was not dating anyone at the time. The prosecution presented this theory. The jury accepted it. We read this transcript twice. David Bintz was convicted by jury trial. Robert was convicted separately. Both received life sentences. The excluding evidence sat in a laboratory. The science was right. The system was not. What strikes us about this case is not the error. It is its architecture. A jailhouse informant speaks. The prosecution wants a conviction. The DNA inconveniently contradicts the narrative. So the narrative is changed to accommodate the desired outcome. The evidence is subordinated to the theory. Confirmation bias at the institutional level. The need for an answer overriding the evidence. The man whose DNA was on Sandra's body remained unknown. He was never investigated. His name was William Joseph Hendricks, but that name would not surface for another 23 years. Hendricks had a history of tavern burglaries and sexual assault convictions involving strangulation. He had been imprisoned for rape, released on parole approximately 7 months before Sandra was killed. In one prior assault, he told his victim she was fortunate he did not beat her. Police found his fingerprints at the tavern. Witnesses saw his car in the parking lot. None of this was investigated. The case was already closed. The Bintz brothers were convicted. William Hendricks died in 2000, never charged, never questioned. The case was already closed. Inside prison, the years accumulated. David made greeting cards. Robert's health deteriorated without adequate medical care. Years after the conviction, the Wisconsin Innocence Project conducted additional DNA testing on Sandra's dress. They found male blood on the dress. It came from the same source as the semen. The same unknown male, not David, not Robert, someone whose blood was shed during the attack. This corroborated the assault theory. Unknown male blood on the victim's dress at the scene. The defense filed for relief. The court denied it. The judge's words still echo. The court called it mere speculation that the man whose blood was found was the perpetrator. We cannot make that sentence mean what the court intended. Read it again if needed. Blood and semen from the same unknown male on a victim's clothing. The court called it speculation. This was not an isolated failure. The Registry of Exonerations documents hundreds of identical patterns. Official misconduct has been found in 83% of wrongful convictions involving jailhouse informants. The system does not self-correct easily. It took external intervention, and it took new science. In 2019, the Great North Innocence Project began working on Robert Bintz's case. Genetic genealogy had changed the landscape. The Golden State Killer arrest proved the method. The technique uses crime scene DNA to find relatives through public genealogy databases. Bode technology performed STR, YSTR, and mitochondrial DNA testing on the crime scene evidence. They confirmed an unknown male DNA profile. Then they conducted SNP testing for investigative genetic genealogy purposes. After several rounds of research, the case was transferred to a college classroom in New Jersey. Ramapo College in New Jersey operates an investigative genetic genealogy center, training students on real cases. In the summer of 2023, boot camp students received a DNA profile from the murder. It was a training exercise, a real case with real consequences. Everything was about to change. Within 2 days, the students narrowed the unknown profile to 3 brothers in Green Bay. What the justice system failed to accomplish in 36 years, students resolved in 48 hours. One of the 3 brothers matched the profile with devastating precision: William Joseph Hendricks, a convicted rapist with strangulation history, paroled 7 months before Sandra was killed. His fingerprints had been found at the tavern. This information was available the entire time. But Hendricks died in 2000. To confirm the genetic genealogy findings, authorities needed his actual DNA. They exhumed his body, remains of a man dead over 2 decades, to answer a question. The Wisconsin State Crime Lab attempted to extract a DNA profile. The initial attempt failed. Bode Cellmark then processed a femur sample, the same bone we mentioned at the start. From that femur, Bode developed a complete STR profile. The crime lab compared it. The probability the semen came from someone other than Hendricks is 1 in 329 trillion. 1 in 329 trillion. The science does not equivocate. The science does not speculate. Additional investigation confirmed further connections between Hendricks and the crime. The case collapsed entirely. The Brown County District Attorney stipulated to the brothers' immediate release. There was nothing left to argue. On September 25, 2024, the judge signed the exoneration order. David was 69. Robert was 68. They entered prison in their 40s. They walked out elderly, 25 years, gone, irreplaceable. The case was presented at the International Symposium on Human Identification, the day before exoneration. The detective who suspected something was wrong about the conviction had kept the file for years. The students who cracked the case did so as a training exercise. Consider what that means. For decades, DNA evidence was available. The technology evolved. The willingness to revisit did not. This case was not about one lie. It exposed a cascade. The lie triggered confirmation bias. The bias filtered every subsequent piece of evidence. DNA exclusion became an inconvenience, not exoneration. The prosecution invented an alternative explanation. The court accepted it. The real killer's evidence was forgotten. Since 1989, the Innocence Project documented 375 wrongful convictions overturned by DNA. In 69%, eyewitness misidentification contributed. In the Bintz case, it was a jailhouse informant. Minnesota has reformed its jailhouse informant rules. Wisconsin has not passed equivalent legislation. After release, the brothers faced a world unseen for a quarter century. No savings, no home. Robert requires around-the-clock care and 20 daily medications. His health deteriorated in prison. They survive on $700 a month in disability. No way for a 70-year-old to live. The claims board awarded each brother $25,000, less than $3 per day imprisoned. The board recommended an additional $1 million each. Whether that recommendation will be honored remains uncertain. David makes cards and sends them to incarcerated people. He volunteers at the nonprofit that sheltered him. He writes to 4 or 5 prisoners regularly. A man exonerated, reaching back to offer kindness. Robert wants to travel. David wants home-cooked food, the ambitions of men who lost everything. Sandra Lison deserved justice. She received a conviction that caught the wrong men entirely. Her family waited 37 years. The forensic evidence was always there, waiting for the science. The Bintz case is not isolated. It is a systemic pattern documented across hundreds of cases. Jailhouse informants receive sentence reductions, favorable treatment, transfers. The system's currency is testimony. The Innocence Project reports that in 24% of cases involving jailhouse informants, the informant later recanted. The question is not whether justice arrived. It is whether we call it justice 25 years late. The DNA exoneration is not a failure of justice. It is justice, delayed, finally arriving. But the 25 years cannot be returned. The health cannot be restored. The decades cannot be unlived. The full court transcript is publicly available. The forensic case study was published by Ramapo. Bode technology details how a femur bone from a man, dead 24 years, produced the match. Every case we examine asks the same question. What does the evidence show versus the narrative? The evidence spoke clearly from the beginning. The system chose not to listen for 25 years. If this case troubles you, it should. The needed reforms have not been universally adopted. Right now, a jailhouse informant is telling prosecutors what they want to hear. DNA evidence sits waiting. Was the court's dismissal of DNA evidence a procedural failure or something more deliberate? Should genetic genealogy be standard where DNA is available, or does that raise its own concerns? Leave your analysis below. Subscribe if you believe evidence should speak louder than narrative.